Welcome to Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church. Our service today is called MLK Voting Rights and You. Good morning. I am the Reverend Dr. Suzanne Intriligator. My pronouns are she and her. Thank you for joining us. Happy MLK weekend to you. As you might recall from before the pandemic, our church proudly hosted the town's day of service on Martin Luther King Monday. But then last year, because of the pandemic, our member Liz Tashoni, who was also sitting on the Melrose Human Rights Commission as a commissioner at the time, created a calendar to replace the day of service, a whole month of service, 30 suggestions of service you can do around here in our own local area. This year, the MHRC continues that tradition. They published a brand new calendar full of fresh events for all ages, all around our local area, and ways that you can pitch in. There's a link to it in the church newsletter this week. Also, there's an invitation there to join our anti-racism team's next meeting. This year, we will be discussing the proposed 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, which calls everyone in our faith to actively and accountably dismantle oppressions such as racism, and to do that work in all our institutions, including our churches. We are planning another special worship service on the 8th principle coming up on January 30th, when we will have as our guest speaker one of the co-founders of the 8th principle project, Paula Cole-Jones. We are looking forward to that. Everyone is welcome in the larger discussion. Of course, welcome to worship on that day, and welcome to the ART meeting coming up this week. The link is in your newsletter. We also have some really great news from our very active immigration ministry team. Here to tell you about that news is the team's current chair, Alex Leach. Alex, are you here this morning?
Yes, I'm here. Hi. Hi, everybody. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Like Reverend Suzanne said, I'm Alex Leach. I'm the chair of the immigration ministry. We are really happy to share some exciting news from the immigration team. As members of RIM's Metro North cluster, we will be sponsoring 2 young women in their 20s from Afghanistan. They're friends who met on their journey to the United States, and they are both aspiring nurses. We will have a lot more details in the coming weeks, but for now, the Metro North cluster is reaching out to our member communities to ask that you support us in this exciting and meaningful journey. Like I said, we're going to have more details coming up very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. One little other piece of news, the worship committee is also very active, met this last week, and we were talking a little bit about the story portion of the worship service. Since we're not having a lot of children in our Zoom services, in fact, it's been 2 years since we've been able to gather children up during that time, we've thought through that maybe it's possible that we could use that space in our worship for something more helpful, more creative. Instead of targeting children, we might make it open it up and make it truly a time for all ages, inviting creative contributions from you, the members of our congregation. For instance, if you have a poem or a song or a piece of art that you've made, or maybe that you didn't make, but it's a favorite to you and it relates to the theme, it would be wonderful for you to take part in the worship service in that way. So in time to come, we're going to be talking more about that. But I mention it because today's story is a step in that direction. We're having it acted out and told by an intergenerational group of actors from our congregation. So look for the story. It's going to be a fun piece of the service today. I want to give a quick shout out to my helpers this morning. Bill, our worship tech, is working from home today, as is our volunteer Zoom chat host, Janice Bissix. Thank you for your help today, Janice. First, as we do every week, let's take a moment to greet all our friends and friends to be here at church. We'll do our weekly ritual of switching to gallery view and waving hello at everybody. Let's see. I know you're all quicker at this than me. Hi, everybody. Oh, that's good waving. Hello, good morning. It's good to see you all this morning. Hello. Oh, wow. Lots of people. Hi, good morning. Happy MLK weekend. Good to see you. Thank you. Oh, somebody else coming in from the waiting room. I love it that we're so busy. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, let's get our show on the road this morning. I'm going to call us to worship with these words from Senator Raphael Warnock, who is now the pastor of Martin Luther King's Church in Atlanta, and he is also the first Black senator from the great state of Georgia. Senator Warnock says, "There is no question that voting rights is a moral issue. I have often said that democracy in a real sense is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. This notion that each of us is a child of God, and therefore we ought to have a vote and a voice in the direction of our country and our destiny within it. And so when we defend voting rights, this is much more than a political exercise. It's really about the dignity of everybody's humanity and our ability to build a future that embraces us all. Come, let us worship together." Now, along with UUs everywhere, I want to light the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice, this morning. As I light the chalice, I invite you to light a chalice in your hand.
Oh.
And here to give our chalice lighting reading, I think, is our longtime activist member, Nancy Free. Nancy, are you there?
Nancy's having audio problems, so I'm going to be doing the reading. This is Dan. Hi, Bill. You can focus on me. In his 1964 acceptance speech for his Nobel Peace Prize, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant."
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm a little sad because, as everyone in the congregation knows, Nancy Free is our most activist. She is always out there doing something. And in fact, it was her idea that the worship service today be about voting rights. So I very much wanted her to give that reading. I will be calling upon you again soon, Nancy. Thank you, Dan, for stepping in. And now it's time for our opening hymn. Tara.
Good morning. Our opening hymn this morning is "We Have Gathered." This is a song that was written for our times by Amanda Udis Kessler, and to a familiar hymn tune. So please join me in singing "We Are Gathered."
We are gathered in the Spirit, our bodies are apart, filled with joy and touched with wonder, separate hands but mingled hearts, giving thanks and singing praises for the love that calls us on from our many different places. We are gathered into one. We are gathered in our sorrow. We are gathered in our fear, in our pain and in our worry, in our anger and our tears, as we tend to one another with our gifts and with our care. Our community is strengthened through the faith and hope we share. We are gathered in commitment to a planet that is whole. Works of justice, acts of kindness, bless the world and heal our souls. As our voices join together, may our song of peace resound. May we offer in abundance all the grace that we have found.
Now let us join together in the words of our covenant, followed by the song of aspiration. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. Our story. In 1966, the UUA invited Martin Luther King Jr. to give its annual lecture at General Assembly. King called his speech, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." And in it, he urged white liberals to support the civil rights movement. Roddy Biggs, a current UU ministry student, and the Reverend Tiffany Stapp used that speech and as an idea and an inspiration for today's story about how a fictional group of people built their own revolution.
Our Time for All Ages this morning is an original story by Roddy Biggs and Reverend Tiffany Stapp of Halston Valley UU Church in Tennessee and the Olympic UU Fellowship in Washington State.
This is a story about a revolution in the way that some people work together.
And some people didn't.
This revolution came about from a dream of justice, of love in a beloved community, a dream like the one Martin Luther King had. So let us tell you the story.
Once upon a time, a long time ago, the earth didn't spin.
This was a very long time ago, in the time before time, in the time of make-believe. Let yourself imagine a time when the earth didn't spin.
This meant that one side of the planet was really hot and light all the time, and it wasn't good for anyone who lived on that side of the planet.
And the other side of the planet was really cold and in the dark all the time. And it wasn't good for anyone who lived on that half of the planet.
In fact, the only place where anyone was really comfortable was right on the border between the hot light side and the cold dark side. This was prime real estate.
Only about 1% of the world population got a spot near the border. And if they got it, they would never let it go.
The rest of the people who were either really hot or really cold were starting to talk to each other about how much they didn't like their situation. This is their story.
I live on the sunny side. I have to stay inside as much as possible, use large amounts of suntan lotion, and my air conditioning bill is ridiculous. Oh, I wish there was something we could do about this.
We live on the cold side.
Nothing even grows on our side of the planet.
We're so tired of importing food and being cold all the time.
If we could only go to the mountaintop, then things would be different.
We need a revolution.
A what?
A revolution, a dramatic and wide-reaching change in the way something works or is organized.
Oh, I thought you meant the other definition. The movement of an object in a circle or spinning around a center axis.
Wait a minute. Maybe that is what we need. Do you think if we could make the earth revolve, then each of our places could be dark some of the time and light some of the time?
And so they invented a really neat scientific contraption called the Revomatic. And if enough people pushed on it, the earth would start spinning.
Do not ask us what it was or how it worked. Just trust us.
The point is that a lot of people needed to work together to push the machine all at once to make the revolution happen.
We've got a great start, but I think we need some more help.
I think we need to ask some of those people over there.
And so they went to ask their friends who lived on the light, dark border if they would help with the revolution.
But they were napping through the entire thing.
Hey, y'all. We're trying to get the earth to turn so that we can all be a lot more comfortable. But we need more help. Please, can you come push our Revomatic with us?
Hey, yourself. I was napping. How rude can you be? I'm going back to sleep.
Oh, but wait, please. Oh, listen. This is a way to make life better for all of us. Life over on the light side is really rough. Things are always so hot, and we need as many of us as possible to participate if things are going to get any better.
No, come on. I think you're exaggerating the problem. I've never had a problem with the light and the heat. Don't be so emotional about it. Be reasonable and polite. I can't believe you would interrupt my nap for this. I'm going back to sleep.
Well, that could have gotten better.
Do you think that person speaks for all of the people on the border?
I don't know. Let's try again. Let's ask my friend Carol.
Carol, can you please help us? Do you understand that we can't even grow our own food on my side of the planet? We're trying to fix this.
Wow, that's seriously awful. A shame, really. Yeah, I'll come help. A lack of food anywhere is a threat to food security everywhere.
And they did help.
For 20 minutes.
You guys, this is seriously hard. Why are all the Revomatics in these really hot places and really cold places? I'm getting so tired and I need to get my temperature regulated. I'm going to go home and take a nap. Good luck, but I'll pray for you.
But the folks who lived on the light and the dark sides of the planet couldn't take a break. They kept on pushing on the Revomatic. They kept on asking others to help. And sometimes the lucky folks in the borderlands would wake up and help, but sometimes not.
Sometimes the borderland folks would get angry about getting woke up, or they would say, it's a good idea, but I don't really have the time to help.
But there were some who stuck with it.
And there were others who pushed the Revomatic for 5 minutes and then decided they know a better way to do it.
And some of them eventually learned to follow the lead of the people who had been pushing the revolution the longest.
And slowly, more people joined in.
Oh, wow. I think I feel it. I think things are starting to shift.
I think I feel the earth moving. Finally, we have the momentum. The revolution is starting to work.
And the earth began to spin.
What happened?
You slept through the revolution.
But we did it. We got enough people together, enough people pushing in the right direction, and we made the earth spin.
And the earth has kept turning ever since, giving people everywhere a way to live and survive and thrive.
And it just goes to show that big change is possible. Not everyone will get on board, not everyone will give their all, and it may take a long time to coordinate. But if you can get enough people working together, pushing in the right direction, you can change the world.
On this MLK Sunday, we remember and honor all those people who came together to create the civil rights movement. It wasn't easy. It took many, many long years, and not everyone got on board.
And some people tried to sleep through that revolution too.
The struggle for civil rights continues today, and there are many ways we can pitch in to help.
So stay awake and keep pushing. We are moving the world.
Thank you to all our story players. That gave me something to think about. Now let us pray and meditate together. Every week we pause for a time of reflection, each of us in our own way, reaching toward our inner selves and our highest ideals. Let's start by relaxing into our chairs, feeling our feet on the floor, letting our bodies settle. Let's breathe in and out together. Now to enter into this time, we'll join together in our centering song. After that, we will sit for 2 minutes of silence. Then we'll speak our joys and sorrows, and I will lead us in a prayer. Our worship theme this month is living with intention. And our centering song all month long will help us be centered in our intentions. It's based on the Buddhist metta meditation. It's called May I Be Filled with Loving Kindness. Here's a video made by our choir this past fall.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
And now we share our weekly practice of speaking to one another of the joys and sorrows in our lives, our personal milestones that we witness and hold in compassion. If you have a sorrow to share with us today, I invite you to type it into the chat box. I will read them aloud. I'll start today with a sorrow for all of the healthcare workers who are impacted by the current surge in COVID, and of course, all the people who are suffering with the disease and their families. From Lisa W., I see a candle of sorrow as we mark the 16th anniversary of Lisa's dad's passing. Donna says, that's Donna Clifford, I'm lighting a candle in memory of my mother. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of her passing. May remember your mother, Donna. Do we have any other sorrows to share this morning? One more from Corey. My sister is quarantined with COVID. She's fine, but she's feeling very isolated. I'm sure there are many thousands of people like her this morning, Corey. Let our hearts go out to them. Janice, any other sorrows in the chat today?
No, I think you have them all.
Okay, let us pause for a brief prayer. Hold these sorrows all together. Let us hold these sorrows in our hearts and minds. May we reach out to all who are hurting today with a gentle touch. Now I light one more candle as a beacon of our care for all the sorrows, spoken and unspoken today. Now I'd like to invite the joys. If you have a joy to share this morning, please type it into the chat box and I will read them aloud. From Dan Griscom, a candle of joy. Thank goodness for pets. I have also enjoyed Dan's cats on the Zoom camera as we meet in our meetings. From Cheryl, a joy. Lily did well with her adenoid surgery this week. Recovery hasn't been too bad so far. Lots of ice cream, popsicles, and Jell-O. We're glad you're feeling better, Lily. Any other joys to share this morning? Okay, I invite us to hold these two in our hearts and minds. And I thank everyone for sharing these joys. They remind us all of the beauty of living. And now I will light one more candle to shine out our thanks for the many blessings in our lives. Everyone is cold this morning. That candle is very stubborn and cold this morning. Please, if you will, join me in the spirit of prayer. I pray this morning for everyone who is struggling under the current surge, our healthcare workers, our families, all the people who are having to postpone their own medical care, all of our families who are having to send children to school, everyone who is in fear and worry this morning. I hold those all up and I hold them in the love and care and compassion of our community. I know we can help one another through. For my prayer this morning, I'd like to share with you these words, a prayer written by the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. Oh God, we thank you for the lives of great saints and prophets in the past who have revealed to us that we can stand up amid the problems and difficulties and trials of life and not give in. We thank you for our foreparents who've given us something in the midst of darkness, of exploitation and oppression, something to keep going. Grant that we will go on with the proper faith and the proper determination of will, so that we will be able to make a creative contribution to this world. Amen. Now is the time for our offertory. Our church is an independent community organization supported entirely by your generous annual pledge. You may also contribute to our weekly collection plate, which we split every month with a deserving cause. You can donate either way using the button in the top right corner of our homepage at melroseuu.org. For January, half of our collection will go to the group Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUU, Blue, a national group that supports UUs of African descent so they can gather, share resources, and help our whole faith become more diverse, more relevant, and more liberatory for all of us. For our offertory this morning, I have a treat related to our theme today. Here is Broadway sensation Lin-Manuel Miranda leading us in a special song he learned in elementary school.
Hello, happy Martin Luther King Day. Every year, Hunter Elementary School students are sad on Martin Luther King Day because we all sang this amazing song called Martin Luther King in our elementary school assembly. And it wasn't until we got out into the real world that we realized no one else knew this amazing song. And it turns out it was because our amazing elementary school music teacher, Barbara Ames, wrote the music and lyrics to the song. And it's one of our favorite anthems. If you went to Hunter, you grew up singing this song. And it's unfair that the rest of the world doesn't know it. So here we have Hunter Elementary School graduates from 1988 through 2001. That is the Miss Ames era here at Hunter. And we're all gonna sing, we're going full Mr. Holland's opus, and we're singing the Martin Luther King song for you, the internet. Arthur Lewis is playing piano. Here we go.
Martin Luther King was a man with a dream. He took his dream to the mountaintop, oh yeah. He soared to the sun, on every morning, love descending down. We'll never stop, we'll never stop. He taught us we shall overcome it if we try. He left us with his song half sung, still ringing from the sky. Martin Luther King was a man with a dream. He took his dream to the mountaintop, oh yeah. He soared to the sun. On every morning, love descending down. We'll never stop, we'll never stop, we'll never stop, we'll never stop.
Happy Martin Luther King Day. We love you. Mr. Sherman's here. Happy Alfred got here late. Happy Alfred.
Shout out to all the teachers out there. Often what you do stays with us forever. And so I am looking, here we go. Let me start my sermon today with a story. On July 17th, 1946, a 36-year-old man named Maceo Snipes did a dangerous thing. A U.S. Army vet who was recently returned from harrowing combat in the Pacific. Maceo decided to claim for himself the democratic rights he had just risked his life to defend. Maceo Snipe walked into his local county courthouse in Taylor County, Georgia, and he voted. He was the first Black man to ever vote in a primary election in that county. The next day, a truck with 4 white men inside pulled up to the house he shared with his mother. The men demanded Maceo and his mother come outside. Maceo was shot in the back 4 times. Without a car or access to an ambulance, Maceo Snipes walked 3 miles to the hospital then. He survived for a day, but the next day, the doctor said that he needed a blood transfusion to survive. But they had no Black blood, so they couldn't give him a transfusion, and Maceo Snipes died. The man who shot him, Edward Williamson, claimed self-defense and was exonerated. A few days later, 2 married couples in Georgia were also attacked by the KKK and beaten and killed. These 5 murders, all so close together in a matter of days, were just too much for a 17-year-old preacher's son who was then going to Morehouse College in Atlanta. He wrote a letter to the editor that was then published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It marks the very beginning of the public life and activism of Martin Luther King Jr. We want and are entitled to the basic rights and opportunities of American citizens, wrote the teenage King. The right to earn a living, equal opportunities in education, health, and recreation, the right to vote, and equality before the law. Since the beginning of his public life, voting rights were at the center of MLK's vision. He knew that the right to vote, the unimpeded ability to actually cast a ballot in every election, is the keystone of our democracy. Without equal access to the vote, Black Americans would not gain the power they needed to change policy and achieve equal opportunity in American society. In 1957, on the 3rd anniversary of the landmark case Brown v. Board of Education, King gathered the largest rally that had yet happened for civil rights. He gathered them at the Lincoln Memorial and gave a landmark speech, "Give us the ballot." And he called for national legislation that would protect all people from discrimination in voting. King said, "Give us the ballot and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot and we will fill our legislative halls with men of goodwill. Give us the ballot and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will do justly and love mercy." But it took 8 more years. 8 more years. In 1965, after many more civil rights demonstrations, after several more KKK murders of civil rights workers, including 2 white Unitarian Universalists who came down to Selma to work for voting rights, finally, Congress passed the Voting Rights Bill in 1965. It was considered one of the most important, most far-reaching pieces of legislation ever enacted by the US Congress. Research shows that it dramatically increased voting among African Americans. It worked beautifully for almost 50 years until 2013, when the Supreme Court decision Shelby versus Holder County, and the Supreme Court struck down the Voting Rights Act, stripped it of many of its most important provisions because, the court argued, discrimination was no longer prominent in those counties. It was based on old information. It was unneeded anymore. That decision prompted a sharp reply from Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her famous quote, Throwing out this law when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. So now we are back in the rainstorm. Now, because of Shelby versus Holder County and another decision that happened last year, it is possible now to enact all kinds of legislation that restricts voting rights, including those that clearly disadvantage communities of color in the South, where it happened before the Civil Rights Movement, and now all across the country. It's been happening more and more progressively since 2013. Last year, 19 states passed 33 laws restricting voting in the US. Today, more than 245 similar bills are on board to come up before legislatures in 20 states in 2022. It's a lot, and they're all very complicated and very different from one another, and I can't summarize all those laws for you, but I did today put a link in this morning's worship reminder to places where you can learn more about all the details. But all of these voting restrictions, all of these laws add up to a national crisis. In fact, the situation is so dire that the King family has asked that we do not celebrate MLK's birthday this year. They have said no celebration without legislation. The legislation they want are the two voting rights protection bills that are now in Congress. They've been passed by the House and now they sit before the Senate. I'll remind you that Senator Raphael Warnock, now the minister at MLK's church in Atlanta, is also a US Senator. I read his words this morning. There is no question that voting rights is a moral issue. Democracy in a real sense is the political enactment of a spiritual idea, the notion that each of us is a child of God, and therefore we ought to have a vote and a voice in the direction of our country and our destiny within it. And so when we defend voting rights, it's about the dignity of everybody's humanity and our ability to build a future that embraces all of us. Beautiful words, very much like our Unitarian Universalist fourth principle, which asks us to use the democratic process in all decision-making. We affirm one person, one vote on principle, and that calls us to act for voting rights. Well, what can we do now? The two pieces of legislation now before the Senate, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Let me tell you about both of them. The John Lewis Act would restore and strengthen parts of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It will help ensure voter protection in states with histories of discrimination. The Freedom to Vote Act aims to shield elections from voter suppression, gerrymandering, partisan sabotage, and financial influence. The goals of that second act include making Election Day a national holiday, requiring states to accept mail-in votes, and restoring voter rights to formerly incarcerated civilians, to name a few. But of course, these two votes, these two pieces of legislation in the Senate to even be brought up for debate requires 60 votes in the Senate, and all of the Republican senators have stood up against these laws. And we of course have 50 and 50. So we need 51. We need we need 60 votes, and currently we have 49 because two of our Democratic caucusing senators have come out not against the bills, but against changing the filibuster. So if you've been watching this, it gets more and more complicated, but the two senators who are standing up for the filibuster are Senator Manchin of West Virginia and Senator Sinema of Arizona. They say that we need the filibuster because it's constitutional and it forces the Senate to work in a bipartisan way. But both of those arguments, of course, are a bit holy. In the last 50 years, the Senate has made 161 exceptions to the filibuster. Mitch McConnell himself changed the filibuster so that the Senate could approve Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court over the refusal of many Democrats. So it has been used on both sides and accepted and abused by both sides. These voting rights restrictions, of course, have been almost entirely partisan. They are not bipartisan. In fact, most of the restrictive voting rights laws in all the states have been enacted without a single Democratic vote. So there is an urgency in the current situation. According to Timothy Snyder, the Princeton historian and expert on the rise of fascism, these voting rights restrictions are part of a larger strategy to overrule the popular vote in the states and nationally, to take control of elections at the state level so no outcome that is not favored by one party can come to fruition. And that party is today's Republican Party. Snyder calls it the metastasizing of the big lie. He says a failed coup is practice for a successful one. We see loyalists in battleground states running for powerful office to control elections, candidates who are endorsed by the right wing because they've embraced the big lie about the 2020 election. They are opening a path where they could overrule voters and substitute their own slate of electors to choose the winner. So these two things are interconnected. Snyder says all of these things set up for us a scenario where the candidate who loses by every measure, not just by the popular vote, but also the electoral college, that candidate can nevertheless be installed as president of the United States. And I think that's probably the most likely scenario in 2024, according to Snyder. Carol Anderson is a professor at Emory University and another expert on voting rights. She says, I see a Democratic Party that does not understand that American democracy is hanging by a thread and does not grapple with the fierce urgency of now. She says, even after you have seen the insurrection, even after you have these legislatures write these laws, figuring out not only how to stop Black people, brown people, indigenous people from voting, but also how to lower the guardrails of democracy that prevented Trump from being able to overturn the results in these states. So even after seeing that, to not move and do what is needed to protect this nation is unconscionable, unquote. That's Carol Anderson, voting rights expert at Emory University. So what can we do? What can we do to change the filibuster so that 51 senators can pass this voting rights legislation and stop what is happening? UU The Vote is asking everyone to phone their senators, to ask all senators to get the voting rights legislation passed as soon as possible and end the filibuster. Even senators like ours here in Massachusetts, who both publicly have come out in favor of changing the filibuster and in favor of the voting rights legislation, even they need a flood of phone calls, according to UU The Vote, to let them know that we support them, to let them know about the fierce urgency of now. You may recall that 2 years ago on MLK weekend in 2020, we ended our service here in the sanctuary by actually writing letters to register voters via the group Vote Forward, a nonpartisan group that helps register voters in all 50 states. We started a letter writing drive here in church, where many of us wrote letters throughout the year, here at church, and then, of course, at home because of the pandemic. Some members of this congregation even wrote hundreds of letters, and I think we helped to register hundreds of voters, and I think it made a difference. Last week, I was talking on the phone with Nancy Free, one of our members, an activist member who has worked hard in every local election, probably in her lifetime. And she said to me, Reverend Suzanne, can't we do more voting rights like we did 2 years ago? Let's do a letter writing campaign. I'm really worried about the state of our democracy. So this morning, I wanted to create a service that included action steps for us, but it's a little tricky on Zoom. I couldn't figure out exactly how to do that. So instead, what I did was I put in this morning's worship reminder that went out via email, a list of action steps with all the links that you need to actually take the actions, including some articles there where you can get information the information about both of the pieces of legislation and all of the states, the voting restrictions that are now happening in states across the country. That comes from the Brennan Center, which is a legal study center at New York University. And I've got links to those articles in today's worship reminder. Also, I've got instructions to do the thing that the vote is urging us to do, is to make sure that everybody calls their 2 senators and urges them to work on this legislation this week. You can do that in one of 2 ways. There's a the vote link this morning in the worship reminder email. That will take you to a page that asks you to put in all your information, and then it connects you by phone to the Capitol Hill operator, and it will connect you directly to your senator, no matter who your senator is, no matter what state you're in. You can do it that way. You can send that link to friends and family you might have, especially in West Virginia or Arizona, so they can call their senators who are being difficult around this legislation. You can share that with family or friends across the country. I've also shared in this morning's worship reminder phone calls to the Boston offices of our 2 senators, so you can call them directly without using the UUA line if you want to do that. So I'm inviting you to act now, to please follow the King's family's request. Don't enjoy Martin Luther King Day. Don't celebrate until you've actually done something today, right now, for voting rights in this country. So please call your senators, let them know. Secondly, I've also given you a list of other things that you could do this week. There are phone banks led by Common Cause, which is a nonpartisan organization. They will train you and help you call voters in West Virginia and Arizona and talk to them about their senators and what they can do with their senators. There is also good news for Nancy Free, a postcarding campaign that's going to start soon, not by Vote Forward, the group that we used to work with 2 years ago, but by a Common Cause, which is a larger nonpartisan group, dates back to the 1970s. It's been working to reform American democracy for 70 years now. And Ann Noonan would like to captain a team of postcard writers here from MUUC. And Ann has given me more information on that. Most recently, they were sending postcards to constituents of senators, urging them to change the filibuster rules. Anne would like to become what's called a postcard host, meaning that she will make packets of 50 postcards available to anyone who asks for them in the congregation. They cost $27. That includes the postcard, the printing of the postcard, and postage. So it's actually a good deal. The postcards are about 50 cents each. Pack of 50, $27. And that money, Anne doesn't make any money on that. No one does. It's simple reimbursement. And Anne was hoping that somebody from the congregation might volunteer a front porch. And every month or so, she can put the packets out on the front porch, and we can use that as a pick up and drop off point. Anne lives in a condo. She doesn't have a front porch. I don't live in Melrose. I can't help with that. So we're hoping someone will step forward to be the transfer point. And I'm hoping a lot of you will step forward to write postcards on behalf of Common Cause. You can find more about that in the link today in the worship reminder. Today in our story, we heard the phrase, "Don't sleep through the revolution." Like those people, those very privileged people who lived on the borderland between the hot side and the dark side of the earth. The writers of the story said, please don't sleep through the revolution. We don't want to be like them. We don't want to sleep through the revolution. Martin Luther King helped us to see that we indeed need one another. Our destinies are finally woven together. He said in the Ware lecture, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one affects all. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you will never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. That is the interrelated structure of all reality. None of us can be free until we are all free. And very pointedly, in the lecture called "Do Not Sleep Through the Revolution," Martin Luther King said directly to UUs in 1966, there is a need for strong leadership from white Northern liberals. There is a dire need today for a liberalism which is truly liberal. What we are witnessing today in so many northern communities, King said, is a sort of quasi-liberalism, which is based on the principle of looking sympathetically at all sides. It is a liberalism so bent on seeing all sides that it fails to become committed to either side. It is a liberalism so objectively analytical that it is not subjectively committed. It is a liberalism which is neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm. We call for a liberalism today from the North, which will be thoroughly committed to the ideal of racial justice and will not be deterred. He said that 57 years ago. In honor of Martin Luther King, in honor of Maceo Snipes. Maceo Snipes, who was killed only 75 years ago, less than one lifetime in our country. We need to stand up to those forces that are still here with us. Forces that would still deny Black and brown people the right to vote. Their tactics have gotten slicker. They've gotten slipperier, but it is the same power grab, the same inclination to save America for a selected group of people and not open the vote up to every person. We owe it to them. We owe it to the two Unitarian Universalists who were killed at Selma, James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo. Let us go forward today and meet this day in their honor, doing what we can to protect the voting rights of all Americans. Amen. Please join me, if you will, in our closing hymn, which is about intention and summoning our own intention to make a difference. It is called I Am Willing, number 20 in our hymnals.
To hold my conclusion.
Wasn't that wonderful? What a beautiful memory. Thank you to our choir. And thank you to Tara, who found that piece just a week ago or so. It's beautiful to have it. I'm so glad you taped it. Please join me in our chalice lighting words. And I meant our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen. Our service has ended. In just a minute, we will go to our breakout rooms for 15 minutes of getting to know each other, talking some more and catching up in our virtual coffee hour. Thank you all for worshiping with us today.